Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Autopsy with Maddee P. I'm your host, Maddee P. Girl. What is cracking, queen? What's going on this week, girls? I'm feeling serene. Feeling like I popped perk 30, honestly. Don't miss that feeling. Am I right? Ooh. I'm really glad that I got sober early because you guys want to... This wasn't a plan for me to say this, but I'm just going to go ahead. I learned this fun fact from these moms one time. I won't say who, why, or where I know them from. But they would get a bottle of wine, and in each glass, they would take a shot of tequila and put that in the Sauvignon Blanc. I followed that trend for several weeks, where I put a shot of tequila in my glass of Sauvignon Blanc. Hey, call the police. That's diabolical. I would get the spin so bad, but luckily, I'd pair it with a little bit of Coke. So I just woke right back up. So it's fine. And I'm really thankful that I got sober when I did, because I was taking some great life advice from some shining stars. A couple of things I'm going to start with. Number one, I don't know if I took one or two of my antibiotics, doxycycline. And I just took a little bit of espresso shot. Can't lie to ya. I don't usually do PM filmings. It's PM, 5:34 to be exact, 43. Dyslexic today. Not to come for the dyslexic community or the stutter community that I am now part of. Really bad start. Really bad. I'm feeling like a monster, honestly. So if something happens and I stop filming halfway through, that's because I did take two. And I start throwing up. I already Googled it. Nothing will happen except for I will get the runs, it says. So I really hope that I only took one. Okay. Are you scared? Because you should be. You should be. Okay. We'll start with some warm-ups now. I'm sorry. If you don't know me, it's nice to meet you. Some warm-ups for the day. I finished Mist and Fury. If you don't know what Mist and Fury it is an... Oh my God. Can I speak? Oh my God. If you don't know what Mist and Fury is, it's an ACOTAR book, the third to be exact. The second two following ACOTAR books are them chilling in Valeris is one of them while they rebuild after the war. And the last one is Cassian and Nesta, who I quite frankly don't care about. I only care about Rysand. And if you have not read this, I'm going to need you to skip ahead just a minute because I'm going to talk about it. Yeah, I am. I'm giving away the ending. When I thought Rysand died, I stopped what I was doing. I was working a pumpkin patch shift, as one does in the fall time. And I was with my father. And I read, "Rysand is dead," were the words on the page. I didn't know what to do. My heart was beating fast. I was about to cry in front of my father over a book. And you know what? I don't need my dad thinking I'm a nerd too. He already knows I'm an alcoholic. I don't need him to know both. And the ending, I guess I'm already talking about it, so I'm just going to say it. Their dad died. Hello. Hey, he's dead. He died. And usually when plots go in that direction and things end in such like a loop fashion, I'm like, this is cheesy as fuck. Why do we have to bring them back? I knew someone was going to die, and I'm so glad it was the dad because he meant nothing to me. He meant nothing. First book, it was sad. I get it. Whatever. He means nothing. And to be honest, I didn't think I was ever going to like Nesta either. She had some repayment to do. But in the end of the day, I'm a fan of Nesta. And right now, Elaine's still a pussy. Okay? And she needs to get her ass off Grayson and get with Azriel. Because, girl, your dad didn't die for nothing. And she killed him. Yeah. She off with his head. Several heads actually flew off during the ending of that book. Riveting. So, I finished it, and I wasn't sure if I was going to read the last two because they're not like part of the family, if you will, of the Court of Nightmares. Night Court. Thank you. Night Court. So I'm like, I don't know, but I sure as fuck am going to read them. Yeah, I am. After that ending, yep, I'll be there. Thanks. Thought about doing a book club with you girls, and then I remembered something. No. That was a devious smile. Not doing that. Not doing that. Because I feel like a lot of the TBRs that I've been watching on TikTok are stupid. And I need some real authors to come back. I truly do. And I'm a fantasy girl. Not going to lie to you. The older I get, the more I'm unsure if I'm asexual or not. Well, we know that's not true. But men are never worth the time. I'm sorry to say it. And the book gives me what I need. And I wonder, like, I don't need to share that part with me with the internet right now. I just don't. But that's all I need. 10 out of 10. It took me a month to read that book. Not going to lie to you. It's the size of the Bible. Actually, it might actually be the size of the Bible. It's like 700 pages long. The words aren't that big on the page either. I think I took 2. I feel weird. Okay. Something I think would surprise you guys right now. Some fries, you guys, right now. Is obviously every year I climb into the rabbit hole of conspiracy theory. I love conspiracy theory. Okay. I think that's kind of obvious at this point. Big Bigfoot girl. If you come from a Bigfoot dad, you understand. Big Bigfoot girl. Do I think Bigfoot's actually real? No. But he is. He is. Like, for instance, mermaids, I do think the possibility exists. Too much of the ocean unexplored, yada, yada. Megalodon, potential. Actually, more so sea creature than megalodon. But anyways, those aren't even the big conspiracy theories we're talking about today. I want you guys to know something about me, and I feel like I'm coming clean. Because I feel like a fake conspiracy girl, because I low-key don't think the Illuminati is real. I know, Maddie. Hey, are you stupid, Maddie? What are you thinking? Coming online admitting that to us. No one really knows that about me. But I think people are just evil as fuck. I think that's the issue. I think especially rich people are evil as fuck. Epstein style, Trump style, y'all get it. And if you know anything about the Kardashians, because y'all be running your hot breath ass mouths about the Kardashians. Don't know shit. Never seen an episode, but you're running your mouth about it. If you ever watch even a single episode of the Kardashians, they talk about God all the time. They're all very spiritual. They all believe in God. They all talk about God. And they don't give me evil vibes. And they are never part of any crazy big Diddy, any crazy shit going on. Their names aren't coming up. Okay? The worst thing that came up with them was OJ. And that Khloe Kardashian, low-key, might be OJ's kid, which I side with on that conspiracy. I think that could be true. Because where did that bull come from? That girl's a horse. She's a horse. She's my favorite Kardashian. She's a horse in the best way possible. That girl is cattle. That ass is real. And it ain't white. Okay? The pictures side by side are uncanny. Anyways, I don't know where I was getting to with that, but I don't think Illuminati is real. I think people are evil, to be completely honest with you. And I think that you pay very real people to get you famous or something, and you have to do really nasty shit, and it's real people, and it's not like a group, if you will, a cult, a club that you're joining. I don't think so. And that's the realist in me, and I wanted to come clean with that. Something I do think is real. Colorado Airport. If you don't know, I don't even know what you're doing here. I don't even know if you know me, because what are you doing here? The conspiracy with the Colorado Airport is that, I guess there's a lot, but it's not just Colorado Airport is the main conspiracy, and I side with that. It's been a while, actually. I think tonight I might crawl into that rabbit hole. And if you haven't seen Mother, this is unrelated. Mother is a documentary about a lady who starts a cult. I can't remember the name of the cult right now. I'm not coming with facts, and I took 2 doxycycline. It's becoming more apparent to me as I speak. Don't know the name of the cult. She was drinking like silver, metal, and eating nothing, and she was an alcoholic, only drinking alcohol. Twinning. Stop. Alcoholic sister. And she died silver. And they just like laid with her in bed until the cops came and found her. That's probably one of my favorite cult stories. I do love cults. Cults are so interesting to me. Also a girl in my hometown that ended up in a cult too. But we ain't gonna talk about that. If you know, you know. If you're from Aiken, you know. Yeah. So that's what I have to say in terms of Halloween this year, I guess, if you will, conspiracy this year. It's striking me that tonight I cannot wait to get into some conspiracy theories when I'm done with this. And I think last and final warm-up point, I'm going to hit you with something today. I've never told you guys this, but I do have several theories. Again, not surprised. Several theories from an uneducated queen that bought a microphone that maybe shouldn't have. I don't know why I keep making these faces today. It's giving eggs. Wig. Wouldn't we wear wigs? Another vocal song I've been having. Church girl who goes to church and reads her Bible. I did it 4,000 times yesterday at work. I've got some theories about stuff, as most beautiful women do. This is a space theory. We haven't done a space fact in a while, and I was going to do one, but I decided to tell you guys my theory. I was sitting around one day watching one of my favorite movies ever, Intergalactic. Interstellar. Thanks, Doxycyllin. Interstellar. I was watching. One of my favorite songs of all time is Cornfield Chase, Hans Zimmerman. Fantastic song. I listen to it sometimes just because. Truly inspiring to me, gut-wrenching, elicits every feeling I need. So if you're looking for a song like that, just play that shit over and over again in the car. It just elicits something very serious in me. And I just had a thought, and I thought, all of our planets in our solar system, Mars was what really made this click for me. But what if people have lived on every single planet and ruined it at whatever hand? For instance, like Neptune, is that all water? I really hope so, because that's what I'm saying. Or like made of gas or something. You know what I'm trying to say, okay? What if like the gaseous one's nuclear explosion? Water ones, I don't know, oceans rise. We climate change, okay? And Mars, the one that, has the potential for human life, was destroyed by war. Or our murderous ways, just our murderous human ways, okay? And what if Earth is the last on the docket? And all these planets at one point were in fact habitable. And we've already gone through the cycle. And there's like history with each of these planets. Just saying. And Earth is the last one. And we're like extra panicked because we know innately. Everybody else is panicking. We got another planet to go to. Innately, we're like, where do we go though? Nothing's habitable. We can't just move on. Not even the rich. Like, where the fuck they gonna go? Nothing's set up on Mars yet for them. So if it ends tomorrow, then what? Just saying. That's my theory. One of many. I guess I'll start exposing you guys to my theories, because now I feel like I can trust you. I didn't know how crazy I would sound, and it was loony bin like, but now you know. So what's happening today, girls? Quote of the week. No guilt is forgotten as long as the conscious still knows of it. Zephin Zwig. Is that how you say that? Did I say that right? Z-W-E-I-G. Zwig. Zwig. When will you wear Zwigs? Stefan, when will you... This week, girl, we're going to talk about guilt and shame. And embarrassment of our past. So many of you know, if this is your first time here, you might not know. I am not a fraction, basically, of the girl that I used to be. The only similarities are our cores, our favorite things in life, but we are not the same. I used to be a actual terror and complete menace to society. This was before drugs, when I was just batshit crazy. This was during drugs and alcohol, when I was extra batshit crazy and it was escalated. And needless to say, I have definitely done some horrible things to people I love, people I don't know, to myself. Yeah. And I'm not scared to admit that. I wish I could be more vulnerable about kind of specifics so that you still feel seen today. But that's just not something we're doing on the internet. It's just not. And I stand with my head very tall now. Not just because of the morals and the metamorphosis that we often discuss here. But I think because I dove into my guilt and my shames head first, and I understood that the root of my pain had a lot to do with exactly who I am. And I hated who I was. And all of us have different forms of alcoholism. Some people didn't drink every day. Some people dealt with a lot of anger. Some people blacked out and were batshit crazy. Mine had a lot to do, obviously, with hating myself. And that was a feeling that I could not shake. Even as I focused on my compassion towards others, which allowed me to have compassion towards myself. And when I really started loving myself through my program and through healing, I still held on to this piece of me that felt like a monster. And we've discussed that piece before. But today I'm going to go ahead and label her as shame and guilt, because she was eating me alive. Whether I am the girl that hurt those people and hurt myself and did some embarrassing, nasty ass shit, that's what my ID says. Fair and square. I may have transformed. I may have righted my wrongs. I may have changed up my morals and given myself a new clean slate. But at the end of the day, that is who I am. Exactly who I am. I am that girl that did all that stuff. And there is no hiding that. And there is no running from that. And all I can do is take accountability for that, because she didn't just go away. I wish that I killed her and it was that simple. But I think now I'm just honest enough to understand. And that's what a lot of healing is, at least has been for me, is just at least the honesty and the recognition. Because parts of, obviously not some of the shit that I've done in my past, but parts of my defects and some of my worst character traits come out from time to time. I'm a fucking person. As much as I want to rid myself of all of this and act like I'm this new amazing person, it's just not the truth. And for me, I need the space and getting the space is through being honest. That's how I get it in my personal sobriety and my recovery. Now I just live in a silent amends, not to get rid of my past, but in hopes to make up for it, and that I would never treat anyone that way again. And even now, as I talk about it, I feel like you can see it's so hard for me to make eye contact with you. I think this is a really intimate topic too for myself. Again, everyone's alcoholism is different. Everyone's defects are different. What they've done in the past. Some people were suffered at the hands of a lot of stuff. I did too, but I also was the person that caused the suffering, and I can't lie about that. And I won't sit here and pretend that I'm a victim and everything. I've done a lot of bullshit, and that's something that I want, a side of me that I want to show you today, because it's the truth. And I'm not proud of it, but I am proud to sit here and be able to be vulnerable, because even though I've done a lot of work on it, I still sit here kind of like a cowering dog, a little bit. And I didn't even tell you any specifics. There was points in my recovery, early recovery for the most part, where I couldn't even think of her, the girl that had done all that embarrassing ass shit. And I think this goes for alcoholics and addicts for sure, but also people who have just done some embarrassing shit in their past, and they're trying to make a new, and whatever version of your life or yourself that looks like, coming into a new and still holding the reputation that you had built for yourself beforehand, which is sticky and kind of hard to unravel. But there's a lot of hope in it too, and a lot of blessings in it. But I couldn't even look at her in the eyes, metaphorically speaking, my past self. When I first got sober, I was on a pink cloud where I was excited to blossom, and I was excited for the new life that I was going to provide myself. But that I could only have that, I knew, if I didn't look really too deeply at what I had done, because it was just fucking gut wrenching, and the embarrassment was at a level that like I can't describe to you. It was an every night situation. My anxiety was so high, and I'm telling you this because I know that there's someone out there that deals with maybe a guilt or a shame that's similar to this. And I want to be there for you and show you how I made it out of that type of pain. Because I would just, every single night, this is a nightly occurrence, I would just lay in bed knowing that part of my nighttime routine was recounting the horrors of my life. This wasn't even shit that happened the day before, let alone, y'all, an active addiction. It was mortifying, especially when I was on drugs. It was mortifying to lay in bed at night. There was no going to sleep. It was a constant replaying in my mind. I was also sick. I was suffering with anxiety. I was suffering with depression, and dare I say, a touch of OCD. So that's a storm, girl. That's a big storm. And it was trifling, definitely during active addiction. But even after, my life still looked the same. And I couldn't recognize that a lot of my life was built around guilt, and it was built around shame. And I am glad that I focused on the good life that I had coming, and that I just focused on getting through one day at a time, quite literally, because ironically enough, those nights like that, which was months on end of me just feeling so embarrassed and so gross and hating who I was, kind of, that ironically enough was at the pit of some of my close calls. I have been blessed enough to not relapse since I've been sober. Knock on wood, thanks. But anytime I've gotten close to that ledge, I haven't had a ton of close calls, thank the Lord. But, I've been close a few times and definitely been like teetering on the fence. And I've talked to y'all about that and about like my ideologies and what some of it has looked like for me. But guilt and shame was always at the pit. And then, I think this goes without saying. I talk about things from my personal perspective because there are plenty of places you can go on the internet and listen to people just straight up talk about guilt and shame and the science and the math and all of what it is. And I don't need to do that. I'm just here to share my story and document my healing journey with you. But ironically enough, too, kind of with that, is guilt and shame is at the pit of a lot of people's alcoholism. It's kind of like the metaphoric hair of the dog, which hair of the dog is what bites a lot of people in the ass. I think that's what made me an alcoholic, honestly. I'm an alcoholic in general, but what really sparked it to like the really pit I got into where I was having to seek help and my rock bottom, a lot of it had to do with the hair of the dog situation. Because that's what it is. It's like slowly over time, you're just doing hair of the dog every fucking day. And it's kind of the metaphorical sense of that, the emotional side of that, where it's just so crippling. And that's like that anxiety is so crippling that you have no choice but to numb yourself out. And I was facing those feelings, but I was sober and there was no way for me to numb out anymore. And that was a really, really, really tricky part of my sobriety. And I do feel really bad for that version of myself. And we'll get in kind of a little bit into that later. And, there are some things that we can't feel too bad for ourselves for. And that's something that I come on here and say at time to time that I don't hear at meetings, I don't hear other people say. And that is that I don't feel that bad for myself. There are certain parts of it that I feel horrible for myself, and it's just sad. It's a disease. I have a disease and I understand that. And that is sad to see a girl go through something at such a young age that was just so devastating on so many accounts, and putting herself in so much danger and just like all that fucked up shit. But at the same time, I refuse to feel bad for myself in some ways. I think it helped in my sobriety. I don't know if that's a piece of advice that I would give you. I don't think it is. I think everyone's sobriety and brain is structured differently. But for myself, I don't hold that much pity, because it's just, you did that though. And as I was attempting to right my wrongs, and I think a lot of people, when they get into sobriety and this, what is the word? Me too. Same for myself, is that you think you have to go so fast through recovery, and you think that you have to heal quickly, and the hope of your life, i.e. your sobriety, kind of hangs on that. and that you feel like you're not keeping up fast enough, and because you see how much of a monster you were, and so you want to change your ways. I'm sorry about the fruit flies. I had a pumpkin situation. Okay, they're back. Ignore it. Sorry. Pumpkin situation. Not this pumpkin, different pumpkin. Don't want to talk about it. And we put all of this pressure on ourselves because we can see finally what we have caused and what we have done. And it's devastating and it sucks and we hate ourselves. And I was trying to get better in a lot of ways, but it's impossible to heal that quickly. It's impossible to change your brain structure. And that's what I was aiming for, was a change in my perspective, a change in my life, a metamorphosis. And it's impossible to do it in X amount of time, in such a short period of time. And we all fall into that trap, I think, to some degree, where we think we are just doing so good and we haven't even scratch the surface. And I implore you to take your recovery slow. That was something that I did to some degrees, but at the same time, you, like I said, I'm not going to repeat myself, you feel like a monster. So anyways, as I was righting my wrongs and trying to change my ways, I found kind of two things to be true that pivoted me into really transforming my guilt and shame. And that was, I had to earn my cleanliness. One, I didn't get to just erase my past, and I didn't get to just pretend that wasn't, parts of that still wasn't me. A, it was all me. B, part of that monster still rests in me daily. Not so much now, but especially at that time. I still... See, I get myself caught up in this because, like, yes, obviously I still face some of those defects. I still face a lot of bullshit, you know, like I'm not perfect, but it was a lot worse in the beginning. And I quickly was realizing that it was still existent in me to do some of the things that I would have done in my past sober and in a healing kind of transitional phase. So I would have to earn my cleanliness. And I don't know, again, what it was in my brain. I think it's this abuse situation where we have talked about that I was my own abuser for many years. And there was always a punishment at hand. There wasn't an operation internally that was supportive or encouraging or really even kind necessarily. And I think some people, when they have that kind of internal dialogue, things slip easier and they allow themselves to act not in accordance with typical morals or what they're striving to be, which is ironic. But for me and myself, and the way that my hate and my brain structure looks is very punishment based. So I don't know if everyone's self-hate looks that way, but mine has that kind of structure to it. And B, I finally kind of had this realization that girl that had done all that and embarrassed and tarnished what it felt like at this time, I felt had tarnished her name, is what I felt like. And I still feel like I carry that red letter on me to some degree to this day, let alone from high school and all that, but from straight just my addiction era. And my circle was small. The people that I was embarrassing myself to were people that I never spoke to again half the time. It was fucking strangers because I put myself in danger and I didn't know people for real. I never spoke to them again. But you know, that's just like a scarring that you do to yourself. But anyways, that girl was wildly broken and wildly sick, period, point blank. And one day I just was thinking about, it just was coming up in my head a lot about my past, obviously. And I was just like, wait, that's the people that I'm learning about. That's who I have compassion for. That's who I part with. That's who helps save me, are people that were vulnerable with me and who share my disease. And I can view them as sick and broken. When they speak of themselves too, they speak of that version of themselves as sick and broken. And I didn't speak of myself like that. And I wasn't far enough out. So maybe part of me wondered if I would just go right back to my old ways and just revert back to who I was and thank the Lord I didn't, or haven't, at least so far. And maybe that's part of what it was that I couldn't recognize like that, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't convinced I was done. And I wasn't convinced in some ways that I was actually going to move forward and go through with the sobriety shit. And that's why I didn't talk about it as much. And when I started the podcast and when I started talking about things more, it was kind of after I had gone through the transformation, I think, with my guilt and shame. And when I finally was understanding that I was a diseased person and that I was fucking sick and that I was mentally severely disturbed. And that is not in a way to make fun of myself, but that's in a way to have patience with myself and to see her as that. I didn't always have to try to understand her anymore, is what that gave me. That, you know, for some reason in our ways and in our past life and even in our embarrassments, if you don't understand it on an alcoholic addiction level, they're always, I think a lot of that anxiety and a lot of those loops of insanity of thinking, because I couldn't find an answer as to why I would act like that, because I wasn't who I said I was. And that was an issue for me. That was something that I could not accept at any level. And because of that, I would look for, there had to be a reason that I would act like that and do something like that or embarrass myself like that or hurt somebody like that. And it, you know, often the answer would have to be somebody else. Somebody else would have had to cause me to be crazy like that. Somebody else would have had to cause that feeling in me or disturb my peace to that level. And that's not the case. I'm an insane person. I'm an insane person. And I was in my addiction, and I was in my alcoholism, and I was before my lips touched a bottle. I have to fully accept that I am insane, delusional, and sick. And that there is no explanation for someone like that to do insane shit. There is no explanation. And I had to identify with that, honestly. And it was grotesque. It was sickening for me to do that, because I, my whole life, had thought I was who I said I was. And I wasn't. I was crazy. And I joke about that a lot on here, but I want you to see the sensitive side of it, because I think a lot more people are batshit crazy than they care to admit. And that's why I come on here with my chest high, my head up high as fuck, and say, yeah, I'm insane. And I'm not joking about it. I mean it for real. And I want you to know that that's okay to recognize that. And it was a pivotal moment in not only in my recovery, but for the rest of my life, I feel. This was a freedom that I cannot repay. This is a freedom that I cannot explain to you, of that right there, of understanding my delusion and identifying with it enough to heal. Because we have to have a place to start, I think, too. And understanding ourselves and acceptance of ourselves is of like utmost importance, at least for myself, and on every level acceptance is, because that was not something I could do. And I was, what's the word? I can't think of it right now. What the fuck? Oh, I was suffering from derealization because I was two-faced, because I was a liar. I wasn't who I said I was. And it was like this like dichotomy of all the splits of me that I've kind of laid out to you before. And it was like a derealization situation that like I couldn't accept things. Even in my recovery, because I was still delusional, I could not accept shit. Because it was just like, I don't know how to explain that anymore. So I'm leaving that there. You know, sickness, being delusional, being insane, acceptance, it doesn't give me immunity from my past. Being an alcoholic, and it might give me a little bit of grace with myself, but it doesn't grant me immunity to any degree. And I want you to see that. And that being a core of my sobriety is the lack of immunity that being sick gives me. And I am not granted a high five and a hug because I'm an alcoholic. I'm sorry. But what it does give me is a way out. Because I can see now that I can never go back to the person I used to be, to the behaviors I used to have, because I can see shit crystal clear. And that's what it does give me. That's what being sick does give me. And I think I used to act out of character a lot, obviously, and write it off. As in, I would do shit that was fucked up. I have instances popping in my head that I'm not going to share on the internet. surprisingly keeping my mouth shut about some things. And you're crazy. There are holes in our consciousness, and you can't just write shit off and pretend that you're not behaving in a way that doesn't align with who you are, and that like in some ways there is a monster inside. That sounded like I was coming for you, but I'm trying in some ways to just be vulnerable about that side, about lying to yourself, and to the point that you have such blinders up that you essentially can do no wrong is kind of what that is. In some ways, you feel untouchable. I'm speaking about myself. Because you are allowed to cross lines. You are allowed to cross boundaries and do fucked up things. But still somehow you're in one cohesive piece morally into yourself. And that's just like, I don't know how to explain that better or articulate that differently. So I don't really know how to break that down. But you still exist in there. And there was holes in my consciousness and in me that were so large and so daunting and terrifying for me to understand that I wasn't just a kind, nurturing person like I'd always deceived myself to be. Because I can do bullshit to others, but the second they do something to me, then I can do something even worse back again, you know? And that's not what this conversation is necessarily about today, but I'm trying to articulate the ways at which I was just simply a bad person, you know, and on so many different accounts. Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, I couldn't face all I had done, and it completely tore me up inside at the beginning of my sobriety. It was really difficult for me. There's a difference, and we've touched on this before. There are different episodes we talk about this, but guilt is about what we have done in our past, something that we have done specifically. Shame is a general discomfort and basically guilt over who we are as a whole. It's a general shame about who we are as an entire whole. And they're not the same thing. I definitely experienced both to a detrimental level, to a level that was like fucking psychosis level, honestly. Like a level of self-hatred that needs to be medicated, for being completely honest right now. And I just want you to know the difference in those two things, because guilt is based around certain situations. Some of us have a lot more situations than others. Some of us did a lot more fucked up things than others. And some of us just carry the weight of guilt differently based on our level of consciousness, to be completely honest. And underneath all I had done and the amount of guilt buildups, I knew I was wrong to some degree. Innately, underneath the surface, subconsciously, I knew my morals were to be kind. And not that I was doing that, but I knew what I should be. And that I was raised differently, A. That doesn't even have anything to do with it, though. It was placed in me that I need to act a certain way as a human, as my responsibility as a human. And I knew that subconsciously. And so my shame was at such a level because I was still just doing shit, though. Left and right, just doing shit. And carrying all of this horrible guilt with me. And whether I thought about it circumstantially or not, or I was able to compartmentalize it because I was fucked up, and I knew like my level of guarding y'all from stuff was so high. Like when I had to go back through and pick through a lot of my past and a lot of my traumas, it took me so long. I still have stuff come up. Like I buried things and bottled things up so deeply, some of them almost instantly after they happened, because I knew there was no way my brain was equipped to handle it. And that was my means of protection for myself. But it was stored in that shame sector, in the way I felt about myself. I couldn't take that away. I could hide. I could drink away a lot and hide a lot, but I couldn't hide things from my subconscious. And that's what we're made of. And those type of experiences are stapled to us in a different way, in a way that we can't get rid of. And when you look in the mirror and your eyes don't twinkle the same and you're dead inside, that is because your soul knows and you're trying to hide something that you know. Some of you work the program who watch this, but honestly, I think a lot of people who watch this podcast are not in the program. If you are, you know about step 5. We do practice anonymity on this podcast. Thanks. We obviously talk about the program sometimes. We talk about certain things, but we do first and foremost practice anonymity. So I won't go in depth on what step 5 is or whatever, but if you're in the program, step 5 is, and I think will always be my favorite step, because freedom from guilt and shame is what granted me this life. That is what granted me my sanity and what kept me sober. And I laid out some reasons as to why, but it is the biggest blessing I've ever had, is to let go of the way that I felt about myself and the way I felt about my past. It's been by far my biggest blessing. And I remember the day that I worked on that step. It's ingrained in me, and it was just such a big gift to me. And it's super important to me. It always will be. But I essentially wrote down all I had done. I obviously worked with my sponsor and did personal work behind this, which is, I think, to me, feels protected by anonymity. So that's just not a way that I'll discuss it today. But some other ways that I went about it, I spoke with my sponsor, and obviously, but I wrote down all I'd done and was able to come clean about that to someone. And I took a piece of paper and I burned it, of every single thing that I could remember that I had done in my life. The list was long. And when you get going talking about admitting your faults, when you get going about that shit and you're honest, for real honest, and I encourage everyone, it feels weird talking about this here because I'm trying to make sure anonymity's on the table while we do this, but be honest about what you've done. If you're not honest about anything else you do, be honest about your past, because that is why I sit here today. I think that's genuinely what has kept me sober, and kept me alive and kept me building my confidence and sprinting towards this different life of mine and this new life of mine that I've been blessed to have, been granted. So be honest about that. And when you get going, if you have your heart and your soul really open, things keep flowing out. And whether it's you remembering things or whatever, while you're talking about it, they just continue to flow. And girl, my list was long. And I wish I could be more vulnerable with you, but I will be vulnerable in saying that it was long. Girl, I've done some shit back in the hizzy, I'm telling you. And I did do a practice where I opened up my chakras for real, but I really opened my throat chakra before this and really chose to be open, and chose, there are certain moments in my life, I take this from recovery, that I don't want to be of my own. I don't. And I am not strong enough. I'm not powerful enough to be that honest. That was not something I had built in myself yet. This was the beginning of building true honesty for myself. I had been grasping at it kind of a little bit at the hinges, at the tailcoats, but I didn't understand honesty, not at the level that I do now, and not at the level that I did walking into it. And, or I'm trying to say, whatever. I just don't have that strength. And I think that's important to know in recovery, whether it's recovery from alcoholism and drugs, whether it's recovery from just mental health stuff, from certain traumas even. But it's important to know when things are that hard and not that innate in you, that something else needs to channel through you, whether that's God, whether that's the universe, whether that's just something and you can't even identify it, whatever that is. There are certain moments where I have to open up and I have to ask for that. And I have to ask for guidance and strength that surpasses me. That is almost like I'm not there in some ways. And I fully am, but it's just an opening of my consciousness that day I chose to partake in. Almost like a practice that I chose to really partake in, because I just knew that it was going to be really painful to be that honest for me. I'd never done that. I was severely dishonest all of my life, severely. I'm not scared to admit that on the internet, because I think people need to know that. I think people need help. And I think it's really hard to be a dishonest person and to recover from that. To be a liar and a manipulator and a cheater most of your life, it's very difficult to recover from that. It's very difficult to look at yourself in the mirror. Do I feel bad for the shit that I've done? Do I feel bad for myself? No, because I still did it, but it's difficult. And I want you to know that I see you for that, for sure. Anyways, so that's a tidbit of information. If you need to get yourself in a different Zen level to overcome certain parts of your recovery, I definitely encourage you to do that. But that day that I kind of went through that practice and stuff it was the first time ever in my life, ever at any point, that my guilt, my shame, my pains, in a way, a lot of my pain was rooted in that. A lot of my depression was rooted in that. Didn't belong to me. That's what it felt like. It truly was lifted off my shoulders and did not belong to me in every way. Like, I felt that way by the time I was done. And that was like, honestly, kind of does make me a little emotional in some ways, because it's just like, I will never forget that. And I am so blessed to have had that moment, because I carried that around for so long. And all I had to do was be like fully honest in this next level way. And, you know, the answers seem so obvious, but you have to be so willing to do that shit. Like, and I knew it was life or death, because I knew these were the defects and these were the personality traits that clung me to that bottle. And I could not live like that anymore. Not only that, I was tired of fucking missing it in my recovery. I was tired of wanting to fucking drink too. And I wanted to feel peace so bad. Above everything else, I wanted to feel free. That is all I have fought for in my recovery. That's the main thing for me, is I want fucking freedom. I don't want to be clung to shit like that anymore. It hurts. It's fucking painful. And that was just amazing for me. And it showed me that I wasn't like too bad, which I'd always thought. I feel like we've talked about that a little before, but I just always thought underneath, like, what I really was, what I knew I was, that other people didn't know about me, I thought I was too bad. And there was no way I could be provided a clean slate. Like, it just wasn't possible. And I thought that was out of the realm for me. So yeah, this was a true reborn moment for myself. And it was, like I said earlier, not only pivotal in my recovery, I think I will look back at that moment for the rest of my life. I look back to it all the time. And that was when my life changed. Yes, it changed when I picked up that first white chip, when I chose to get sober, but it changed drastically during that moment, during that period of time. It was a representation that the bane of my existence didn't have to be so secretive. There was the secrecy that I had always lived in for forever, since I could remember. And like, even as a child, that I no longer had to live like that. And I didn't have to keep lying. And I didn't have to keep hiding. And I was not alone anymore. Not only in the very sense of other people in recovery understanding my brain and people understanding where the fuck I'm coming from, and that type of freedom and that type of unity, but also I didn't have to be alone, because I'm not hiding from every single person that fucking speaks to me anymore and is looking me in my eyes, whether they know about recovery, whether they don't, whether they know I'm an alcoholic or not, know my past or not. I hid from everyone, and I wasn't alone anymore, because I had the confidence to know that I'm a human being and be part of society too. And that was another thing that I was chasing with my freedom, because I knew that was really important for me, to be reunited with people and be able to have the confidence to understand I'm a real person and that I exist, and that's not something that's going to change. I'm not going to go away the way that I wanted to before. And that was an amazing feeling for me. And I think it's important to also point out, because yes, there was all the bullshit I had done in my addiction and stuff, but there was a before that too. And I was always guilty for something as a child, as a kid. Hey, badass, for real. I'm a badass, and not like cool badass little kid. Stank ass little kid was what I was. Snot-nosed brat. Okay. And I was always in trouble for something. I was always guilty of something. And that, I think, from a young age creates a level of shame in who you are, because, you know, so many guilts, it's just how you feel about yourself. And that does something to somebody's confidence and to their soul, I think, as a kid. And I remember reading about this later at some point too, that, you know, OCD and just people that are obsessive compulsive situations, because I don't want to label myself or anyone else, but there is a lot of guilt that is a side effect of that, or a symptom, I guess, because some of the the way that I felt about guilt and shame was the way I felt about nostalgia. And y'all have heard me talk about nostalgia. If you haven't, I have a very weird relationship with it. I had a very weird relationship with it, a very hard time growing up, a weird relationship with growing up. And I had a very big guilt around becoming an adult, and I felt weird about things, and I was just, in general, uncomfortable. Discontent, uncomfortable. And I had this just astounding level of guilt, sometimes for things I didn't even do. I don't want to make myself sound like a horrible person. I was loving growing up. I'm exposing the darker side of myself on this podcast. But I was also just a kid, and I was just a girl, and I did badass shit. But, I just had a level of it that was just uncanny. It was just is uncanny the word? I guess not. I don't know. But the fuck, you a kid? And I remember feeling that way. And I bring that up just because if you part with that too, it's just kind of weird to reflect and look back on those times. And that, I've just had such a weird relationship with guilt and with shame way before my lips even touched alcohol, way before pills, anything. From there on out in my recovery, from the moment that I felt was very pivotal in my life, from then on out, I would ferociously search for because things would pop back up. I'd have new guilts, have new shames over things that I had forgotten about in my recovery that came back up, something I'd have a dream about, in my subconscious and remember. And I definitely did some things in recovery. I'm not doing things that are to that level. I'm not on drugs and alcohol, so I'm not being fucking crazy like that. But little things here and there. When I got my anxiety under order and I really worked on that, when I got that under wraps, that kind of subsided because a lot of that was just obsessive behaviors and obsessive thinking, and it was a guilt that I had given myself. It wasn't healthy guilt. It was very unhealthy, and it was taking responsibilities of other people's actions, of their emotions, and that was kind of more so what my guilt looked like in recovery. But yeah, there will always be things that I do wrong. I'm a person. There will always be things I do wrong. And so anyways, I would search for that, and I would journal and journal and journal and journal until I felt like I didn't have to have ownership over that thing anymore. Until I felt like it didn't have to belong to me. And I would eventually be able to rest at night because of that. And I'm so glad that I worked on that part of myself in that way in my recovery. Obviously I stayed for the 50th time, but then I would only suffer with the crippling suffocation of the future, which we've worked on and talked about here. But that's what I would deal with, and not so much the past. I didn't realize, and I don't think others realize, that you can let go of your past. You can become anew. You do not have to be that person, and you can heal. That is through honesty. That's through humility. And the only way you're provided that is through active work and through a living amends, a promise that you are not going to be that way anymore. That has to exist if you're going to be granted freedom. And there is a price to pay. Like I said earlier, that was a recognition I had. No one's coming to bring you a new life. No one's coming to grant you a new. No one's coming to give you a clean slate. And you don't pay with that through weeks or through months. You pay for it through your soul. Through your soul is how you're granted freedom like that. I went through a lot of pain, obviously, like stated before, a lot of time in my life where, in my recovery, a lot of time in general that I suffered at the hands of my payment back of the shit that I had done. It felt like I was taking the pain that I had given to other people, and I was willing to make that payment. And I often talk about the balance, and that's what this is bringing back up, the balance of life, of, you get what you give, the yin and yang, the way that things work. And I truly think you have to pay for what you've done to others, and it is uncomfortable and it is painful. And there's a reason that we are given the emotion of guilt. There's a reason for that, and what it does to your psyche. And, guilt eats you alive. And I side with that opinion too. And so I do think it's underestimated. I was willing to pay for that through weeks of time of pain, of being sober, of that untended to wound of guilt and shame. And that's what it takes. And you have to be willing to understand that. And you're not going to get coddled. You're not going to get forgiven. You're not going to get told that shit's okay, because it's not. What you've done is not. Period. And you might never get forgiven for some of the shit you've ever done. But you have to be willing to pay that. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be made to feel better. And I think that sucks in sobriety. There are certain things that do kind of suck like that, where it's just like, it's a self-soothing that comes into play too, that again is a blessing. And I want you to remember that. You're learning self-soothing too, which is something I never had. And that's a blessing. And you learn that through pain. And I sound so like, I don't know. I definitely don't sound empathetic right now, but I very much so am. Sobriety is as much about building a new life as it is payment for your past life. And you don't just get to like get up and say, oh, I want a beautiful life now. Okay, I've just done all that nasty shit, and I've been in active addiction and active alcoholism for a long time, and I'm now deciding that I want to be granted this beautiful life with all these promises and all this shit. It's intense work. And that sounded like to deter you, but it's not meant to. I just want you to see the importance in emotional sobriety. And that's what I think has gotten me sitting here still, actively working on my sobriety, looking to help others, and excited for the future of my sobriety. That's what allows sobriety to be beautiful, what allows it to be peaceful and fun, and not feel like you're in jail and being told what to do, and you just want to go out and that's all you're thinking about is going back out. And at the end of, that pain of the untended to wounds and of the groveling and the anxieties and the hard time that I was spending sober at the beginning, where I didn't understand things yet, was I could finally be very, very, very proud and strong. I could be all I'd ever wanted. And I think that is what provides me with my focus today, because I've conquered a lot of big demons in my life. And I say that with confidence because I did conquer them. And that provides me with this confidence in everything is possible. Everything. All is possible. And I genuinely believe that. Everything that I want to be, everything that you want to be, it's all a possibility. And I was granted that through that time period, I think. I am most proud of my changes to my character in my sobriety. I'm proud of a lot, and I know I've accomplished a lot over the past little bit of time, and it's just the beginning for me, it feels like. But there's no reason to be shameful of who I am. Even when I make mistakes. Honestly, especially when I make mistakes, I'm not shameful of who I am. And I know to hold my head high, and I know how to analyze things now in a way that makes sense, that aren't so obsessive, that, when I do things, I know that they're this compared to what it used to be. And I also know this is very important too, to take care of that, to make sure that my character is reflected on, to make sure I sit back and I journal about it and I talk to somebody about it, or I analyze it, or I recognize it. And I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm also never going to be that girl again. Once again, what that shows me and what I want it to show you again today is that the only way out is through. And that is the case amongst almost every circumstance that we talk about. I wasn't always going to be forgiven, but now I could forgive myself. And that's, I think, the final step of healing with guilt and shame, is learning that you can forgive yourself. And that is only after honesty that you can. I still suffered, like we talked about earlier, I guess, with some unhealthy guilt in my anxieties and in my recovery. And those are moments that I feel absolutely insane and completely out of control. And that's because those are other people's actions. That's whether I'm taking responsibility for them or a situation, whatever it looks like. It's unhealthy guilt. And it feels out of control. I feel insane because it's not in my control. Because it's like waiting on a acceptance letter or some shit. I don't know. What the fuck did I use that? I don't know. Okay, I don't know. But those moments, and I still have that from time to time, where I take on somebody else's emotions or whatever. Whoa. That was a doxycycline burp, girl. And that is when I will cut off my lights and sit alone, really deep in my gut, try to get as close as I can, like meditating, like in a different way, because sometimes I can't hear myself in there and I can only blame her. And that's something I still face from time to time. It's gotten a lot easier for me, but definitely when I started to understand shame and guilt, and when I was still dealing with a good bout of unhealthy, that's what I would do. If that helps anyone, if you face that, or if you're in a certain type of relationship or whatever, shut everything fucking off and get as quiet and as still as you possibly can. Because self-regulation sometimes is like, that's how I would do it. I didn't have another way to cope, but I did understand. It's kind of like self-timeout, but in an encouraging way. Because guilt, I think I clung to it in this way to help me regulate my morals, but guilt is not a friend. And guilt is punishment. That's what guilt is. Don't let it trick you into thinking that it's teaching you a lesson. If you did something wrong, you feel guilt. But I'm talking about in terms of kind of unhealthy guilt, or if you face a severe amount of it that maybe has to do with some type of mental disorder, like myself, or whatever. So just remember that guilt is a punisher, and don't let it trick you. It's not your friend, and it's not teaching you a lesson. You're being severely hard on yourself in a way that you sometimes can't see. It's important to reclaim your internal dialogue, because when we are facing guilt, it is all consuming sometimes, I feel like. And it's important that you reclaim your internal dialogue. That was really important for me, and it does not need to be a war zone in there. We take action in this life. We fight for the ability to love ourselves. This all, of course, was a big fight for a lot of things during my guilt and shame, but overall, too, what I see it as now is that was a fight I was willing to make for freedom and to love myself, and obviously to love others and care for others. But I do think we talk about self-love a lot on this podcast. I know it was really hard for me, and it's probably hard for a lot of my people that are watching this, and that is the cost, is everything, to love ourselves. That is what we pay here. Period. Bitch. Period. I do not feel the same way about my past anymore, about how horrified I was by it and by who I was. I'm not as embarrassed by it today. Now it is more a testimony to me. It is proof that people change. It is a proof that you can change. And it's another proof to me that people deserve second chances. And this allowed me to be a lot more gentle with people, because I was provided a second chance by not only myself, but countless people in my life, people that love me deeply and allowed that for me, which is a gift that again, I can't repay, and is just beautiful. And everyone deserves a second chance. I fully believe that. And you are capable of change. So I don't know how many people will part with today's episode, but that's kind of all I have to say to you. You have it in you to change your past. You can't go back and change it, but you can change the outcome, because the outcome is still going on, and you can still make amends and be honest about what you've done and who you are. People respect honesty upright, and you might not be forgiven again, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to be forgiven. We're here to heal, and we're here to be the best that we can possibly be moving forward. So yeah. And I love you guys, and I hope you have a great week. Bye.